were starting a funding network. A lot of reports called him an evangelist, also connected to the FTX crypto exchange. Detailed financial information about its donors, cult members. Basically just made enough money to survive. Welcome back, guys. So, in the interest of completing a family profile, I decided to look into Sam Bankman Fried's brother, Gabriel Bankman, which honestly I think after reading everything about him, I think he was really influenced by his mother. Mainly because Gabriel Bankman was so involved in a bunch of politics. And not just front and center in terms of trying to get money donated to certain people, but also in the back end, because he also has experience with data analytics firm, specifically that targeted politics. I really have a suspicion that Gabriel maybe wanted to run for office at some point. We do know that Barbara's influence was extremely powerful on the sons when it came to anything and everything political, especially from everything that the FTX lawsuit against the parents said, considering they gave email examples of Barbara's influence on Sam. So it's of no surprise that she would have a similar powerful influence on Gabriel. She was obviously priming either Gabriel or Sam, or maybe both, to run for office. And remember that Caroline herself said that Sam had aspirations of even becoming the president of the United States. To make mama proud, I'm guessing. Barbara would have loved that. But of course, those dreams came crashing down. Alrighty, so Gabriel Bankman, he's 3 years younger than Sam. So now he should be about 28 years old. He graduated from Brown University back in 2017, where he studied computer science. Big data guy. No surprise there. Interestingly enough, after college, he ended up working at Jane Street Capital, the same firm that Sam and Caroline worked at. So he probably got a good reference from his brother. So after Jane Street Capital, he moved on to go work for a data analytics firm, specifically a political data analytics firm called Civis Analytics, headquartered out of Chicago. So given how everything right now is kind of controversial, I highly suggest keeping the comments clean because, of course, a lot of this political stuff, people get triggered, people get offended. The algorithm might get offended. The AI is watching after all. If you ever want to say anything and not put it out in public, you're welcome to email me directly. You can find my email in the About section of the channel. Okay, so Gabriel ends up working at Civis Analytics for a while. This firm specifically for profit, which is interesting. It's interesting that it's not a non-profit. Anyways, it supports Democratic candidates and PACs. And this firm is very well connected. It was founded back in 2013 by someone named Dan Wagner, who was the chief analytics officer for former Presidente Obama, his re-election campaign in 2012. With the Civis firm becoming such a crucial asset to campaigning that according to Influence Watch, it was actually employed by nearly all Democratic presidential campaigns for 2020, and it was even used by President Joe Biden. And according to InfluenceWatch.org, so connected that after the re-election victory, the CEO of Civis met at the time with the CEO of Google, which was Eric Schmidt at the time, where it says that Civis Analytics, the firm itself, where it says they got strategic guidance and funding for Civis. Doesn't specify if it was from Google or from Eric Schmidt, the CEO at the time. Maybe from both. And apparently many of the first employees were all campaign staffers for former Presidente Obama back in 2012. So the Civis Analytics, being essentially a big data firm used for strategic campaigning, they actually say that as far back as 2018, this firm, this data firm, had over 220 million Americans in its database. Very important for so many things, including personal marketing. Extremely powerful stuff. That's how powerful big data is, which they see as extremely important. An example provided is combining data from the Obama campaign with data from TV ratings. This way they say they optimize voter targeting and increase the return on investment for campaign ads. So that makes sense, pretty rational. So the same CEO for Civis Analytics previously was the targeting and analytics director at the DNC. So very, very well connected. And it does say that the firm itself received substantial funding from Eric Schmidt. Is that a surprise? Well, not really. So I'm sure that Mama Bear was extremely proud of Gabriel Bankman for working amongst these top campaign officers. Of course, because they're so well connected and well aligned with Barbara Fried's vision of the world, if you want to put it that way. These were her heroes, so no surprise there. Just like his older brother and his mom, supposedly Gabriel Bankman was also an effective altruist. And honestly, some BS media outlets like Slate, for example, they actually have the gall to say that Gabriel Bankman, while working at Jane Street Capital, was practicing effective altruism, where Slate says that he was earning to give as a trader. Somehow, I highly doubt that. So from Civis Analytics, he transitions to work for a US representative named Sean Casten, a Democrat out of Illinois, where Gabriel starts working for him in 2019. And Gabriel just had a minor junior role as a legislative correspondent, and it went on from 2019 until 2021. Now, as a lowly employee working for Casten, who apparently knew and had a relationship with Sam, I'm guessing he received some donations from Sam, but according to the DuPage Policy Journal, a publication coming out of the state of Illinois, they say that Gabriel never made more than $45,000 while working for Casten. So from 2019 to 2021, he only made $45K per year. So after taxes, he basically just made enough money to survive. But according to this policy journal, Gabriel spent at least $351,975 on campaign donations from 2021 and 2022. If those donations were made in his name, where did he get the money? Well, he got it from Sam, of course. So if that money was donated on behalf of Sam or Barbara, would that also be a campaign finance violation? I don't know. Now, on a side note, if you thought effective altruism was going to disappear, well, you would be mistaken. It's alive and very well. It has not died of embarrassment. Not yet, anyways. So on their website, they actually have some upcoming events for 2024. You guys can go check out the conference in San Francisco in February, or in Mexico City, or spend a nice summer weekend with other effective altruists in London, summer of 2024. So despite all the embarrassing press, well, effective altruism lives on. And apparently Gabriel was so into effective altruism, a lot of reports called him an evangelist. Very interesting. And now honestly, I just think some of these people are like cult members. But even if the whole thing is a sham, I'm sure some of the members are truly, sincerely believing in the cause. Now, influencewatch.org actually has Gabriel starting Guardians Against the Pandemic while he was working as a staff member for Casten. Now, Guardians of the Pandemic was started as a non-profit, but supposedly Gabriel and Sam were starting a funding network, keyword network, because they created other advocacy groups. It wasn't just Against the Pandemic. And of course, let's not forget Barbara's Mind the Gap, also connected to the FTX crypto exchange. And there was the Family Foundation, also connected to the funding network, Family Foundation, called Building a Stronger Future, which also donated heavily, including giving $5 million to journalism outlet ProPublica. The same Family Foundation also gave a ton of money to Vox, which is another media outlet. So via these foundations and nonprofits, they were literally making donations to media outlets, which explains a lot of the positive reporting that was done of Sam and the family. It makes perfect dollars and cents. So the website for Guarding Against the Pandemics is still up. It's still functional, but a lot of it has been scrubbed or parts of it deleted. For example, Gabriel Bankman's profile on the website was itself deleted, but of course it's the internet. Old cache copies exist. So the profile used to read, Gabe Bankman Fried is the founder and director of Guarding Against Pandemics. Prior to that, he was a staffer on Capitol Hill and worked for Civis Analytics, where he improved private house forecasting and resource allocation models that advised Democratic political action committees and large donors giving hundreds of millions of dollars in the 2018 election. So that profile description, well, no longer exists. So funny enough that as a nonprofit Guarding Against the Pandemics, located in DC, as an organization, they hired 26 lobbyists, which I'm guessing didn't come cheap, and they supposedly spent over $1 million lobbying Congress on pandemic funding just in 2022, which to me seems really odd. And it seems odd because they were running ads for political candidates, which of course costs a lot of money, and hired 26 lobbyists in Washington, DC, which also costs a lot of money, all to lobby Congress on pandemic funding. I don't know. Seems a little odd. Apparently, there's documented instances where the weeks before the 2022 election, the so-called nonprofit was hosting parties for congressional staffers of both Republicans and Democrats. Cocktail hour, happy hour. I'm guessing those 26 lobbyists were there too. And all of this was taking place at a townhouse purchased by FTX, located right next to the White House. $3.3 million purchased by FTX, a few blocks from the White House. Here's a copy of an invitation to happy hour at the townhouse. Cocktails and conversation. Now, what's funny about this invitation is that below, it talks about Ryan Salame donating over $13 million to Republican candidates, supposedly boosting up to 15 GOP candidates. It reads, Salame, a 29-year-old cryptocurrency mogul, decided to get involved in politics this year because he believes that the federal government is unprepared for the next pandemic, launching a super PAC to boost GOP candidates. On average, Salame invested nearly $900,000 on each candidate. The key word being invested. Have these people returned the money? No. Have the people from the other side of the aisle returned the money? No. All very interesting. Now, Gabriel Bankman worked alongside Michael Sadowski, another experienced political strategist. And this guy went on to form his own super PAC called Protect Our Future, which was also supported by Sam Bankman Fried. So Protect Our Future in 2022 was the third largest donor, most of the money coming from Sam and of course FTX crypto exchange. So between the super PAC of Protect Our Future and the nonprofit, Gabriel Bankman was basically living it up. He was getting to be a rock star in DC. So from a lowly aide position to handing out millions and millions of dollars in DC, he started to get treated very well. He even had 2 White House meetings with senior staff and received invitations himself to speak on panels with government officials. So for being, what, 26, 27 at the time, throwing cash at all these people, of course, they're going to treat him like a rock star, especially in DC. According to the New York Times, just the first year, Guarding Against the Pandemics raised more than $22 million. Where did that money go? Well, that's a good question. Virtually all the money came from FTX crypto exchange or Alameda Research. Now remember that all of Sam and FTX, and I'm assuming most of Gabriel's involvement in these political donations, were also involving Barbara Fried. Now another strange thing is that the lawsuit from FTX against the parents, Barbara and Joe, so in that lawsuit they brought up the 501c4 nonprofit tax-exempt organization. And that's an important distinction because such a classification is permitted to engage in some political campaign activity and make political donations, but that the nonprofit failed to file the proper paperwork with the IRS for over a year. So having classified itself as a nonprofit 501c4, it allowed Guarding Against the Pandemic, it allowed the whole nonprofit the ability to not have to disclose detailed financial information about its donors, either publicly or to the IRS, which of course included all the commingling of names via FTX, Sam Bankman Fried, and Nishad Singh, just like he testified during trial. And according to a lawyer specializing in nonprofit law that the New York Times interviewed, what this did was obscure the amount of money, essentially making the amount of money that was raised or spent an unknown amount. Now going back briefly to Michael Sadowski, who is supposedly also a committed, effective altruist. Surprise, surprise. And I gotta say, this guy comes off as like super shady. So Sadowski's super PAC was supposedly also using a lot of the same donors and funders and vendors affiliated with the nonprofit Guarding Against the Pandemics, the one run by Gabriel. But Michael Sadowski used to work with Guarding Against the Pandemic. So it's very likely that on one hand you have the nonprofit, on the other hand you have a specific super PAC built for the sake of financially supporting campaigns. So they're formed and coordinating amongst each other, both formed with infused money from the FTX crypto exchange. And remember that Nishad Singh, if you watch the trial series, he highlighted Michael Sadowski and Gabriel Bankman, their important roles in the campaign donations, to the point where he said that they had access to accounts, meaning they had access to accounts on Alameda Research, on FTX, where they can take funds to support whatever causes they're pushing. Now this Michael Sadowski guy is no dummy. He got himself a lawyer, with the lawyer saying that his client has not been accused of any wrongdoing and had no knowledge of anyone being reimbursed for making political donations, saying that the Protect Our Future super PAC was advised by lawyers and a compliance firm. These guys are just weird. Just super strange. They all have lawyers representing them. Gabriel has his lawyer, Joe Bankman has representation, Barbara Fried has representation. They all have lawyers because they need them. Because of course the family at this point is just insanely shady. It's just undeniable at this point. Now there are a couple of very silly things that Gabriel Bankman was involved in. For example, he spent nearly $500,000 to support a ballot initiative in Denver, in Colorado. So basically they spent all this money to put on the ballot whether they should increase tax, 1.5% increase on tax, sales of pot in Denver, and the funds raised would be donated to the University of Colorado for pandemic prevention. The whole thing seemed rather silly. And then of course the other silly things were the reports where Gabriel Bankman supposedly wanted to buy a small island. And I mean really small, 8 square miles, around 12,000 people live there, tiny island. Check out the pictures. So supposedly a memo was sent to Gabriel Bankman concerning the sale of this tiny island and whether he wanted to purchase in order to construct a bunker, a shelter that would be used in the event of a societal collapse, essentially. A collapse where 50 to 99% of the population would die. So this bunker / shelter would ensure that the most effective altruist would survive. Ridiculous. And this tiny island sanctuary during the collapse would allow the development of human genetic enhancements, whatever that means. Sort of like an extreme prepper scenario for an effective altruist. Anyways, Gabriel's lawyer totally debunked the whole thing, saying that Gabriel received an email with a link to the memo, but he never asked for it, he never requested it, he never endorsed it, etc., etc. Now, I don't know if this is a coincidence or not, but Guarding Against the Pandemics, the nonprofit, the website, which is basically bare bones at this point, barely has anything in it. But strangely enough, it does have a lot of stuff on DNA sequencing, basically the body's data. DNA sequencing for experiments and projects, saying that an area of interest is biosecurity regulation for gene synthesis providers. Pretty bizarre. Talking about a growing gene synthesis industry and regulations behind it, saying that customers themselves might invent their own genetic sequences, or they might use sequences that they found freely online. Supposedly. So oddly enough, they talk about gene synthesis providers not legally being required to screen orders shipped within the US. Well, as you can see, the whole family is very, very strange. So obviously this is all tied in with biotech, etc., etc. So all about playing God. So yeah, I find this very strange. Also strange that the whole website is basically non-existent at this point. The nonprofit is non-existent at this point. So why is this still up? It's all very strange. For an Ivy League family with proper views, and of course, high social status, well, they seem pretty darn crooked. So in the end, it does seem that Barbara Fried was a massive, massive influence for Sam, and of course, as we can see, for Gabriel Bankman. All right, guys, well, I'll leave it here. Thanks so much for spending time with me. Drop a line, say hello, and please don't forget to smash a like, subscribe if you haven't, and I'll see you in the next one.